Dr. Thomas O'Donnell, energy and geopolitics expert. Thank you both, gentlemen. Professor Paulo Bonchiok, let me start with you. So, what is the possibility that Israel would hit Iranian oil facilities in your opinion? What is the benefit that Israel will get out of that, and what is the disadvantage to the United States?
Well, look, if they do hit Iranian oil facilities, it better be a big hit. In other words, the objective of that will be to deprive Iran of precious revenue that it gets from selling oil. But as your piece indicated just a moment ago, that is one oil market in the world. It's not just that if you hit Iranian oil facilities, Iran suffers. The whole world suffers because if you decrease the availability of crude oil on world markets, this definitely could lead to, will lead for sure, to an increase in prices. Now, there's a lot of spare capacity in the world. We know that Saudi Arabia and other countries have actually curtailed oil production to sustain oil prices. So it's not a dramatic, it's sort of tragedy, but this could escalate out of control. What if the Iranians start bombing Saudi oil facilities in retaliation or something like that? It's really not to predict how this is going to go. And obviously, if we go into the more parochial and yet the critical interests of the Biden administration, the last thing you want to do 1 month before the elections is to have an oil crisis. That's the last thing you want to do because people will look at gasoline prices going up and say, it's all Biden's fault because people are not that sophisticated to figure out oil markets and how they work, etc. So, in a nutshell, the risks are extremely high and the benefits questionable because, again, unless this hit on Iranian oil facilities is dramatic, that is, it destroys Iran's ability.
So we will definitely elaborate on the U.S. position. Thank you for this analysis. Pivoting to you, Dr. O'Donnell, thank you for joining me again. So based on past experiences and past wars in the Middle East, since 1967, the first Gulf War, the second Gulf War, all of these confrontations, back then oil prices would skyrocket really even before any confrontation. So will we see the same scenario this time around?
Well, it's good to be here again tonight. Thank you. Already, prices have bumped up, a few dollars a barrel. I'd say this is a geopolitical risk. You could say this is geopolitical risk being added in. But I agree with my colleague here that Iran exports about 1.7 million barrels a day, and there's OPEC Plus has 6 million barrels almost offline. The Saudis have 2 million barrels offline. In principle, this doesn't cause any kind of crisis in the oil market by taking Iran offline. What could be done with sanctions? So that's not, I don't think, the problem for OPEC is that the price keeps falling for well over a year, even though they keep holding all this oil off the market, and even though this war is going on. So just the other day, the Saudis were saying they were going to give up, dump oil on the market and go for $50 a barrel, but go for getting a larger share of the market. So, and also on this second thing, yes, if Iran retaliated by hitting hard other Gulf states, UAE, Saudi Arabia, this could cause quite a crisis. But on the other hand, so far, what we've seen is Iran wants to cause maximum trouble for Israel without provoking a direct war. And they have caused a lot of trouble with their proxies and also the retaliation twice now with missiles. But it seems to be under the threshold that they don't want an all-out war. And as long as it's not an all-out war, it doesn't make any sense for them to expand the war by hitting Saudi Arabia and UAE. If they do that, that means they feel they can't prevent a larger war and they're going to go for it.
هي استطاعت الوصول بصواريخها إلى إسرائيل، لماذا تستهدف السعودية أو الإمارات؟ سيدة شيراك
Israel with the missiles, so why not direct those missiles at the Gulf states? Professor Chirac, but the US president also said that he was rallying the world countries to prevent a full-scale war and avoid this entire scenario. Why do you think he feels like he needs an international momentum when so many people think, well, you can tell Israel, just don't do it or do that instead?
Well, look, I'm afraid that whatever the angle here is, the Biden administration, and now the record is long, is really several steps behind events. Since last year, the dreadful attack by Hamas on Israeli territory, October 7th, the U.S. administration has tried to stay ahead or to be on par with events. We can this, we can do that, we can have a ceasefire agreement. There's something is possible, and there's this proposal, and there's the amended proposal, and the amended proposal. Nothing happened. I mean, there was some modest diplomatic successes at the very beginning with some exchanges. Israel got back some hostages, liberated a huge number of prisoners from Israeli jails. Something happened, but no momentum there. So right now, it seems to me that the Biden administration, which, let's remember, it's just for the last few months of its life, the one thing they want to avoid is a major crisis that will engulf the United States and force America to do things that it really doesn't want to do, to get involved in a war in the Middle East. I am sure that behind the scenes, the American military has represented to the Iranians the risks of escalation. America still is the biggest world military power. Not maybe as big as it used to be, but it still is. So if the Iranians can think that they can deter America from intervening because of political concerns, etc., well, maybe they should think twice. Their efforts, the Iranian military efforts, have been so far surprisingly unsuccessful. Their retaliation, lobbing missiles, drones first, and then now ballistic missiles on Israel, achieved practically nothing. That's not all that Iran has. I wouldn't call these great military successes. Hezbollah, which is the spear of the tip of the spear of Iran's proxies next to Israel, has been hit very badly. So can Iran reestablish the perception of being the dominant military
Professor,
power?
you're saying that we're not almost like in a sense the Iranian response has been ineffective, but Israel also said that some of these missiles fell on the ground. Pivoting to you, Dr. O'Donnell. So about the economic situation again in the region, let's talk about the Middle East. It's not good, and I mean already, and let alone in a war. Obviously, the price of the oil barrel would rise. So, can you tell us what changed, how oil prices changed after this war, and what's your expectation? What will be the impact of the economy of the Middle East?
My fundamental point is, as long as this war has been going on, even before October 7th last year, generally oil prices have been falling in the world, okay? And OPEC and OPEC Plus has been desperately trying to keep the prices up by taking oil off the market. And despite taking 6 million barrels a day offline, the price kept falling. Recently, there's all sorts of people entering, gambling on what's going to happen. They might make some money if there's a big blow up, which I don't think that'll happen at this stage. So if it wasn't for the threat that maybe Israel will bomb Iran and Iran will hit Saudi Arabia, the price would continue going down. The Saudis looked like they expected it to go down in the 50s. Okay, so there's plenty of oil in the world. There's too much oil for the market. The market is very soft. China's very soft. Europe's very soft. That's not, unless Israel really wants to start a big war and the Iranians, which I don't think they do, it's unlikely that we're going to have a crisis. And if I could I would marshal these facts a little bit differently than your other guest tonight. looking at it a little more analytically, when this attack happened October 7th, Biden went to meet with the War Cabinet in Israel, and all the reports, people who were there, said he kind of lost it with these guys because he asked them, what is your strategic plan? You're going to go into Gaza for what? What are you going to do? And they said, we're going to wipe them out. Well, they said it's not possible. And this showing they're even having to go back to areas again and again. There's a lot of casualties. Hezbollah did not have a lot of interest in getting involved in this. They weren't very happy with Hamas starting this. But that's been going on and provoking. Now, Israel has had a lot of military success recently in decapitating Hezbollah, weakening it, and showing that they can do things inside Iran. But I would ask, and I think this is where the Biden administration is coming from, what's your plan? You're not going to defeat all these enemies. You're sort of smiting your enemies. And yeah, that might cow them for some years, but in 10 years, you'll be back at it again and again. And there could be all sorts of new terrorist stuff. What's your plan for putting an end? What's your plan for deals with people that you can't really wipe out, your enemies that you can't really wipe out? And maybe Israel has too much hubris right now because they can do things militarily. But as you said, the Washington Post today said 24 of these 200 missiles actually hit targets. About 20 hit one Israeli air base, a few hit another, and a couple hit near the head of Israeli security. It could get bad on both sides if they keep doing this. So what's the plan?
Iran and the IRGC had threatened that any response from Israel would be met with a more forceful response than the latest barrage of missiles that Iran launched. And so Iran said that they might, target infrastructure, not just the airspace. So that will definitely trigger an all-out confrontation and a bigger economic problem. What do you think?
Well, absolutely. I mean, obviously, if this spirals out of control, Iran hits Israel, causing some damage, not at all proportionate to the amount of force they unleash, but they certainly cause some damage. And of course, there's an element of pride. They hit them. It's an act of war. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. This is not an accident. This is a deliberate act of war from Iran against Israel. That's quite clear. And Israel cannot say, okay, well, that's another day at the office. We'll deal with that. No, they say, no, we got to do something. And the something is just a, how can I say, demonstration, retaliation, and then say, okay, let's call it quits, because you hit us, we hit you back, not very badly, so let's not escalate further, or indeed escalate further. And at that point, quite frankly, it's not possible to make any predictions as to how this is going to end up. And I certainly agree with my colleague that for Israel to be able to claim absolute victory against its various enemies, Israel is surrounded by enemies, unfortunately. Hezbollah. You've got Syria with Hezbollah and Iranian troops. You've got people from pro-Shia militias in Iraq. You've got enemies within in the West Bank. You've got Hamas in Gaza. You've got the Houthis now all the way down from Yemen trying to do their best to hit targets on it. But it's not a very good situation. And can Israel say, okay, we are at war for our survival and we'll continue for as long as it takes? That's a very interesting political, emotional statement, but I'm not sure how credible that is to say we'll fight until the end. If that's the approach by Mr. Netanyahu, well then, God help us, because then we have no idea where this is going to go, if that's really his intention, unless it's just posturing. But again, we don't really know that. The situation is extremely difficult and volatile. And again, just on the oil issue, of course, right now, the oil markets are not threatened. But if we start bombing oil facilities all over the place, well, then the game changes.
Indeed. Thank you, Professor Chirac. I will ask you to stay with me to discuss another topic. And thank you so much, Dr. O'Donnell, the energy and geopolitics expert. Thank you.